All right, so there'll be some intro music going on, and it'll ease in. And all right, welcome everyone to the GRODCAST. I'm joined today by Ericuh. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Things are okay. You know, school's about to start, and so it's going to be a change of pace, but I'm trying to eke out what I can from this summer, you know.
Exactly.
So do you want to just dive in?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Ericuh, what is important?
Well, to me, I think connection with other people is important. Otherwise, you can really lose your sense of self and kind of lose meaning in life. I think it's important to have a purpose behind what you do a lot of times to feel fulfilled. And a lot of that relies upon connection with other people or other creatures and with yourself.
Yeah. I think it's hard to be anything without first having a sense of self, you know, but we try. Anything else that's important?
Well, yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I think the earth is important. The planet we live on, taking care of it. Without that, we wouldn't have our life here. And then just being kind to other people, I think, is also important. When you start to lose center, I think it helps you kind of stay grounded if you act in kindness towards yourself and to others. Because we can kind of get, again, lost in our thoughts. And I often focus so much on other people, and I forget that I also need to thank myself and be kind to myself. Take time for myself.
Yep. Can you tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah. I'm a teacher, and I teach Spanish, and I'm also a parent. I have 2 kids and a wife and a daughter. Those are other things that I do. But my profession is a teacher. And I'm currently taking a break from coaching, but that was also a big part of my identity. I coached cross country and track. But what I do in my job as a Spanish teacher, a lot of people, you know, they kind of have their memories of what it was like when they took language. I focus on teaching kids communication skills, but also I focus on teaching cultural awareness and tolerance and opening their eyes and minds to perspectives other than what they've experienced in their lives.
And what drew you to Spanish or languages broadly?
Well, I've always loved language in general. I thought when I was younger, I wanted to be an English teacher. I really loved reading, literature, writing. But then I spent a year through Rotary as an exchange student in Argentina between high school and college. And that was where I really had my first experience of cultural and linguistic immersion. And I fell in love with the culture, the people, built up my confidence with speaking, where I was dreaming and thinking in Spanish all day. And when I came back, I dabbled with a few other majors, but I kept kind of coming back to education because I'd been a tutor in college. And yeah, that's kind of how it started generally.
What were some of those other potential majors you were thinking about?
When I was in Argentina, I thought I wanted to go into journalism. I kind of had this dream of writing for National Geographic. And I remember I used to write these long reports about my travels and experiences there and send them home to my family and to my Spanish teacher. And then when I started college, I was in the communications program, but it was more theory. It was at Cornell. So their communications program is less a journalism program. So I kind of I did my work study at Latin American Studies there. And while I was working in Latin American Studies is when I first started to think about becoming a Spanish teacher, but I was also surrounded by a lot of PhDs. So I was also considering doing my PhD in Spanish literature or something along that in that area. But I witnessed a lot of PhDs while I was there doing their doctorates or people who weren't quite yet PhDs. And it was a really competitive environment. And I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. I was also interested in law school. I did go to law school for a year and then decided that I really wanted to teach. So as much as I love to read and study and learn about other people and ideas, I really like to be on my feet, moving and interacting instead of sitting still.
Yeah, and those books will still be there whenever you want to return to them. So
that's very true.
So a little bit lighter of a topic, but what is one of your favorite movies and why?
Oh, geez. That's a hard one. That's really hard. It's changed over the years, definitely. I mean, certain movies I'll go to because I just need to laugh. Like last night, we watched the Simpsons movie because
it's not the worst day of your life. It's the worst day of your life so far. Right?
So far, that's right. As we had tried to reupholster some chairs and it went really wrong. That's why you hire professionals, is what I learned for that project. So I needed to laugh, and I'd forgotten how smart the Simpsons humor is, how many cultural references, historical references, movie references pop up throughout the movies. So that was a good one just last night to kind of default to for a laugh when I need a laugh. But it's hard for me to say I have a favorite movie. Sometimes if I need sometimes I really like to watch the movie Encanto, which is a Disney movie, because it's like a Spanish teacher favorite now. But first of all, Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote the music along with Carlos Vives and who's the other artist? I'm blanking on his name, but has really great music. It really dives into magical realism, which was, if you know, Gabriel Garcia Marquez from 100 Years of Solitude.
From Colombia, right?
He's from Colombia. Yeah. There are so many really cool cultural references that I nerded out when that movie came out. It's deeper than just a Disney movie. They really did justice to Colombia's musical, cultural history, literary history. And the movie's kind of rooted in magical realism, which Marquez basically started in Latin America, at least. that's like a good feel good. It's funny that I've picked two animated movies so far. Sometimes movies with real people are too real for me, and it stresses me out, right? So I kind of like movies for that sense of escape from the stresses of real life.
Yeah, a movie where it's just me working all day would be pretty boring. But I think that so much work goes into animation, and it's crazy what they can do now. Like even like textures of hair and physics of snow and stuff like that is wild. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like I'll go back and watch an older film and realize how basic the animation looks. And then when you watch something now, they almost look like real people on the screen. I remember reading an article about the movie Frozen and how much went into creating all the different types of snow and ice.
Yeah, my only coding class experience was an intro to Java, but the guy teaching it was someone who worked at Pixar, and so it was all on like graphic animation and stuff. But I never really fell in love with coding, and I know that's the big thing, and I'm in the Bay Area with all these tech people, but
yeah,
let them code.
That's a labor of love. You have to put in a lot of time, and the result's really cool, but seems like a lot of monotony, right?
Yeah, I'll stick to my music, you know. So, moving forward, do you have any advice about maintaining friendships sustainably?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, you know, I have some friends that I see fairly often, but a lot of times that's because of geography, right? They're it's more convenient or easy to get together. But then I have some friends who, certain ones that have sustained since childhood or high school or college or my early adulthood. And then, there's the layer of social media too, that makes it easier for people to stay in touch. That's kind of interesting. But my advice for those long distance friends, I guess, is that we make an effort to check in. Not just definitely during holidays and birthdays, but then at other times throughout the year. Just letting them know that you're thinking of them, or like, hey, I read this and thought of you. And I think it's really important to just make a phone call sometimes too and hear each other's voices. And then on top of that, because I have friends who live out in San Francisco. That's where I went to law school, and friends scattered all around the country. So I think it's important that when you can, try to make an effort to visit each other or plan a trip together, because you do evolve. I'm in my middle age now, and some of my friends are married with children like I am, and some never had children. And I think it's important to get together and see that you're still connecting, even if you have chosen different paths in life. And, sometimes you have to know when you've evolved and changed and maybe aren't connecting. So, your question was about maintaining friendships. There's also the layer of times when it's maybe you shouldn't keep holding on because it's not healthy or not clicking. I had a friend who went down like a conspiracy theory wormhole and never came back out. And that was really hard. But yeah, I guess, I think a hard thing is when you go through different phases of your life at different times and still being able to relate to each other. And if you can get together and hang out in person and still laugh about the same things and have conversations, then you kind of keep nurturing that friendship. And I think it's kind of like about, can you be yourself with that person too? You're not pretending to be who you think they want you to be. So I guess making them feel that level of comfort too is important, that they can be authentic and vulnerable, and trying, not judging them for their choices.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of all of the people we've pretended to be for other people. And it's a lot easier, I think, just being yourself. And the people who don't want to be around that can, like you said, it's okay to let go sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, maybe the word evolve is used too much, but you grow and change, and some people go a different direction, and you find out if you're still compatible.
Yeah, and even if you lose some friends along the way, it's better than not growing,
Yeah, exactly. I think of when I was first teaching in New York City, was with a lot of other young teachers with no experience. And we were all kind of overwhelmed. And we would go out for happy hour on Fridays and definitely consume too much alcohol and shots of tequila, whatnot, and be ridiculous. And then I decided, that I wanted to run the New York City Marathon. That was my first marathon experience. And so I signed up, and then I started training, and then I stopped drinking because I was all in, just training every day. And I was coaching. And so I stopped going to these happy hours, and I grew apart from that friend group. And it was kind of a bummer because those were like some of my closest friends. And then a few years later, one of the friends in that friend group reached out to me, and she said, I'm training for the New York City Marathon now, and I totally get it. I totally get why you stopped hanging out with us. And so it was kind of nice because that friendship kind of came back, and we were reconnected through that love of running. So yeah, that's just one of many examples of how you can change, and then the friendship can sometimes have a low, and then you can reconnect later on.
There's always hope.
Yeah. You never know.
So, circling back a little bit, why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because I think education solves a lot of the problems in the world. Learning, understanding, understanding other concepts, but also just understanding other people. I think that really sunk in for me as an exchange student, because the idea behind the program is that you can clear up cultural misunderstanding, or you can strengthen relations between countries by having youth go and represent a country, because people tend to be more open-minded to younger, like kids or teens, than adults. And so the idea was that we were youth ambassadors going there, and they could see, oh, this person's an American, and they are different than what my stereotypes were of an American, or they're really likable. And that was the first time I'd experienced, or maybe even ever heard of, how disliked Americans were in other countries. Yeah. And so that was a big learning experience. And I had one host uncle, like my host mother's brother. He didn't like Americans at all, but he kept saying, well, you're Irish, because my last name was McNally. And I was like, well, that's like my heritage, but I'm an American. But he was like, no, you're Irish, and so you're okay. And so it was interesting. But the concept behind that was that I met people from all these different countries, and people from those countries met me, and they were like, hey, Americans aren't so bad. Or, I learned about French and South Africans and Japanese and, of course, Argentinian. So that same type of spirit I like to bring into education, that so much misunderstanding and conflict and suffering that we experience in the world is a lot of times due to a lack of perspective or understanding other people and ideas. So, and I think I can make the biggest impact in the classroom than I could have in a courtroom. I can't. So I said one of the discouraging things in law school was realizing that whether or not you felt like a case should go one way or another really depended on the biases of the judge or just the law and them interpreting it exactly the way they interpret it. So I like the impact I can make with kids, and I like that I learn from them too. They tire me out, but they keep me young, young in mind and spirit. I learn so much from them. I've noticed I have family and friends my age that are definitely out of the loop with slang and that type of stuff. So
skibbity
toilet, Ohio and Riz and
listening to that song of all the brain rot words has made me feel old, but at least I'm aware of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I've learned the whole point of it is just that it is nonsense, the brain rot, right? And then I have kids too. I feel like once my kids get older, I might get a little more out of touch because they like to point out when I'm dressed incorrectly or not cool. But
that's what kids are for,
Exactly.
Connecting a little bit, is there a country that you would want your kids to go at some point, in terms of connecting with other cultures and whatnot?
Yeah, let's see. Well, I would love for them to go. They haven't been to Argentina yet. It's a really expensive trip, just the flight alone. I would love for them to go there. But in a lot of ways, I don't know. I feel like it would be so eye-opening for them. They would see how we have a lot of privilege and resources in the United States, but it's also a really beautiful and diverse country. I think what I loved about there was people had pretty small homes overall. And they didn't go over the top like we do here for holidays like Christmas, but there was just so much love. People would gather together all the time. When you had a holiday or a celebration, it would be from babies to great grandparents, and everybody would be up and dancing and talking. A lot more hugging culturally. So I feel like Argentina or a lot of the Latin American countries, I would love for them to see that experience of such a warm, open, inviting culture in general. In the US, we're a little more closed off, a little colder. Let's see. And then, it's hard to pick a country. It's like I said a region, Latin America. And then I'd say Europe is pretty amazing too. There's so much history there. It's kind of mind-boggling how much older it is than the United States. So we can kind of see what a young country we are. Um, and just to see like all the different languages spoken too.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty.
Are your kids studying Spanish?
So my daughter actually studies French. She did Spanish when she was in kindergarten through fourth grade. So she kind of, when it was time for her to pick a language in sixth grade, she decided she wanted to do French. She's interested in going to med school, so she wants to take Latin as well. And then my son started Spanish formally last year. He took some when he was younger. But yeah, they both really like language. And I hope the travel bug bites them and that they travel a lot in college. And yeah, there's so much to see. It's really hard to pick one country. I hate to discriminate against any region. I mean, I had a roommate from Japan in college. It would be a cool place for them to visit too.
Yeah, and if they go to one country and say Latin America, it's a lot easier to get to the other ones from there. So
yeah,
you can hit
exactly.
them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can do some pretty cool trips. Yeah, so just the big thing is safety, but then, you see some articles that say the United States isn't considered safe to a lot of other countries to travel to. So,
yeah. And I think there's a lot of variance within the country. And so I don't know though. I haven't really been much in the like Midwest or like this Western South areas. And so I feel like as much as I am an American and know America, there's still like a lot that I haven't been exposed to. And,
yeah, it's a huge country. I got to do 2 big trips in Argentina because it's like the 7th biggest country in the world. It's a pretty big country. We did one through the north and one the south. And the topography is a lot like the United States. You have mountains, you have plains, you have glaciers down south, you have a rainforest up north. And when I got home, I thought, I've seen more of Argentina than I have of the US. I need to do that trip, right? So I have done like the cross country trip, but it is pretty amazing when you look at a place like Europe where you have all these smaller countries and they have different languages. You could fit that within the United States, and so of course we're going to have a lot of different cultures within our own country that I don't think we think about or notice as much, right? And you can't have a culture shock when you travel places in the US too, right? Like going down south. My father lives down in Charleston, South Carolina. That's a different culture. And then like you are out on the West Coast now, and I've lived out there, and that's a different culture and
quite different.
Yeah. Like the mannerisms of people, and you have to kind of realize you need to observe for a bit and figure things out. I spent some time in Minnesota last summer. You just notice the way people talk, and it's interesting.
Yeah. Yep. Even like within New York, like you can divide as much as you want and you'll find differences. And I think there is something nice about the things that hold the same across regions and cultures. The core humanity,
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That we're still humans and generally smiling, and a lot of the nonverbal cues are pretty universal.
We eat and we drink and we sleep, you know.
Right.
Well, moving to a little different, what is something that you wish had never been invented?
Oh, gosh, that's hard. Hmm. You know, it's hard because I think a lot of things that I don't like, you can also see benefits to. Because a lot with like phones are annoying and social media can be annoying, but there are definitely a lot of benefits to them. So I can't say that. Um, I'd like to say the atom bomb because that seems like one that you would pick, but then I think, well, somebody would have eventually invented it or something else to replace what its purpose was. Seems like there should be obvious things like.
I had a tough time trying to think of one when I was writing the question. So
Okay, not just me. I mean, you could say burpees or some sort of core workout that you don't like doing. Maybe, gosh, I have to get creative with this. I was thinking of how we were just watching, we briefly watched a show that was about dogs and was talking about how breeds were invented. Basically, like how all the dog breeds are really just an inbred. Like there was a mutation and someone said, oh, this, like of the golden retriever. And then they started going, we like this. So obviously all these breeds have been inbred and they create all these health problems for these dogs. And I wish they could be more like cats where there's just not as many breeds, right? Maybe there'd be less health problems. That's a very small thing. It's not that big of a deal. But when I think about how many people are dog owners and how many of them end up sick, and maybe they wouldn't have as many issues if they weren't so inbred. I have no idea.
yeah, I mean, it creates issues when humans do it. So, yeah, my friend Hank has a French bulldog and there's all sorts of health stuff going on all the time. So,
yeah, pretty much anyone I know who has a French bulldog, they either have issues with breathing, or I know someone whose dog has all these issues with its spine. But yeah, that's something minor, but I can't think of maybe certain illnesses that are maybe opiates. I don't know. Again, if a certain opiate hadn't been developed, I read this whole book about what's it called? It was about the Sackler dynasty. I'm blanking on the name, by Patrick Radden Keefe. Empire of Pain. And it was very interesting. The first half of the book is just about Arnold Sackler, the founder. And it started off as him wanting to invent a drug for patients. So instead of having lobotomies, they had another cure. So, but then off of that spun other developments of other types of drugs like it. So I think even if opiates hadn't been invented, something else would have been. Just like that's invention is just natural human curiosity or drive to come up with a solution for something, right? So yeah, that's a hard question. I just threw out a few ideas.
yeah.
Did you have an idea?
I think just because of the field I'm in, my brain went to like, PFAS or some other chemical that we invented to, make couches not catch on fire, but is now like poisoning us. But just like you said, if it wasn't invented then, someone else would have thought of something equally, both good and bad. And, maybe there's an inevitability to it.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit different. Who is one of your favorite historical figures and why? And it can be literally anyone. So.
Oh, wow. Huh. That's a hard one. I think that's another one that evolves over time. When I was a kid, I was really fascinated by John F. Kennedy. Thought he was pretty cool. I think I'd heard some of his speeches, but then as I got older and I read more about him or watched documentaries, I wasn't as impressed with some of his behaviors or history. I don't know, probably someone I really admired and still do, but was passed on as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who pretty amazing. So it was a pretty amazing life, very well educated, and how she was the first woman in a lot of instances in her education and career. And I really respected her analysis of the law. So she's definitely someone I admire and wanted to be like. Let's see. Yeah, those are hard questions. Maybe the teachings of Buddha. That's kind of where I am now, learning more about that theory and way of life.
Yeah. All we are is all we are, right?
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I guess I could see the Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the inspiration to go to law school and all that. I thought about law school, and so I was taking a bunch of political science classes, but when Trump got elected, the discussion sections got pretty toxic and just not so fun. But
so it got very heated with both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. It felt like an MUN conference instead of a classroom. So.
Like you were preparing your case constantly. Yeah, that sounds intense. Yeah. I can't imagine.
Yeah, youth, So you currently live in New York. What would you say is the best part of being a New Yorker, state-wise, not city-wise?
Well, state-wise, I think the cost of living is very reasonable here. I had lived in New York City, then San Francisco. So whenever I would come back, I was blown away by how inexpensive everything was, and thinking about how much I was spending on my apartment or just buying food, and noticing how much more, how I could buy a house here for a fraction of that. I think it's beautiful here in the summer, which can be frustrating because that's when as a teacher, that's when I naturally have time off to travel, but I want to stay around here more. It's really green. There are a lot of hiking trails, waterfalls, lakes, a lot of natural beauty up here. A lot of fresh produce that you can eat and grow. And yeah, I had one of my friends from France came to visit me, and she kept saying how green it was here. And I hadn't really noticed it until she said that. And then I think I really noticed it too when I lived in out in the Bay Area because it would get so dry and brown.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the natural beauty up here and the affordability. And I'm not a huge fan of the snow, but I do like the 4 seasons. We have beautiful, beautiful falls. So yeah. The natural beauty.
Yeah, seasons are nice and something that I do feel like I'm missing out here. Like the summer feels pretty much the same as the fall, and the winter, the only difference is it rains every now and then. So I'm excited to probably move somewhere in the Northeast and get those seasons back. Makes telling time easier.
Yeah, you don't realize it's just such a way of life for you when you're used to the 4 seasons, and then you think of places that don't have that, and you're like, how do they know it's Halloween or Halloween's coming? Like we get it in our physical environment, like, oh, the leaves are changing, it's time to carve some pumpkins.
But I do know a good deal of people who prefer the mono seasonality of California. But anyhow, moving right along. What is not important?
Oh, not important. I didn't know that one was coming. So something that I'm working on, or that maybe I wish I had realized when I was younger and been more confident about, is worrying about what people think about you so much. I mean, you should care about your relationships with people and being there for them. But I think I did a lot of things when I was younger because I was looking for some sort of recognition or reassurance that it was the right thing, or maybe that was from elementary school where I got awards all the time. Mm-hmm. And then high school, I got awards. I was like a very good student. And then you get so conditioned for that. And then you become an adult and you don't really get that anymore. I mean, you get hired and you get jobs, but you're not getting awards and praise all the time for everything you do. So you have to kind of learn how to do things because it matters for you, and less about worrying about being judged. So I guess that applies not just to jobs, but friendships and relationships too. That helps with your sense of self that we talked about earlier. And in general, most people are worried about themselves. They're really not thinking about you. That's a good piece of advice I've heard. You kind of get worked up about an interaction, or you said something weird, and then you just play it over and over in your head, and that person doesn't even remember that you said it. So I think that's what's not important, is getting caught up in worrying about what people think so much.
It's a good answer. So thinking more about the future, I guess, do you have a bucket list? And if so, what are some things that would be on it?
That is a good question. I mean, they're all good questions. A bucket list. I definitely do. You just sometimes, as you start to get older, you start to go, oh, gee, can I do this? Your bucket list will change. I definitely want to travel more. Sometimes I feel guilty when I travel. I go down this spiral of worrying about the environmental impact and the privilege behind it. Definitely try to be sensitive to, places like Hawaii where people travel and tourism kind of wreaks havoc on the people that live there that are indigenous or native to the place. But I think still if there's some things that you just have to see and experience in person, right? So I think some of the traveling I want to do, I'd like to do with my kids. We talked about earlier, I'd love for them to go to Latin America and Europe, and it would be really cool to go with them. Although I don't have to, I want them to do their own thing. But I'd love to go down to like South Africa or Australia, like that part of the world. I have friends that live down there, and it would be really cool to go to Japan or India, Thailand. I have some friends in Thailand. There's so much I want to see. I love traveling. So my bucket list is to make it to, have a solid career through retirement. And then when I retire, travel. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to write a book. I definitely have always been a writer. And I think I have a lot of stories to tell. I read a lot. I see a lot of authors speak, and I feel like that's something that I'd like to do. Other bucket lists. I don't know. I want a pool. That's really basic. It's getting hotter here.
It'll only get hotter.
And it's only getting hotter, sadly. Doesn't seem to be getting milder in the summer. So I'd like to get a pool to deal with that. But
below ground or above ground?
In ground?
Yeah, in ground. I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No. But there is a part of me that would like to move more out. We live in the suburbs right now, and it's a good location. My husband travels sometimes for his job, and it's a good location for my kids' school. But I'd like to live more out in the country again. It's kind of where I grew up. I liked being near water and having a little more privacy and land to grow a garden. And we have dogs, like more space for them to run around. But who knows? It's a toss-up. I also like city life because you can just walk everywhere, and I think that's good when you're older. You can socialize more easily with people and you have less mobility. So I don't know. My bucket list is always changing, and that often stresses my husband out because he's a planner. And so he hears me say something and he starts to wrap his head around it. And then a week later I'll say, no, I want to do this instead. And he's like, wait, you said this. So I guess I'm pretty spontaneous. So that'll never change. My bucket list will always be adding on new things. How about you?
I think I too would want to go to Australia and New Zealand. I've been watching this TV show put on by the Australian Broadcasting Company or Corporation called Spicks and Specks. And it's named after an old Bee Gees song, but it's like a music trivia type of show. And I don't know, it just feels like Australians seem to have more fun than us Americans.
Yes. I mean, I haven't been there, but I had a lot of Australian friends in Argentina that I've stayed in touch with, and they've come and visited, and they get really long. They get a lot of weeks off for vacation too. They travel a lot, but yeah, they're just fun people. Mm-hmm. I hadn't thought about that. I should check out that show. I hadn't thought about, there's definitely a lot of interesting music that has come from there. They're pretty proud of it too.
Yeah. It's a little tricky. I have to use a VPN that says I'm in Australia to watch it. But
Okay.
a little tricky. And the other thing that is also on my bucket list is to write a book. I'm at like 11,000 words, but I know that's only a fraction of what I need. But it's just been something that when I feel like I have free time and I am feeling stressed or whatever, I can just start writing. And, you know, putting something outside of your brain makes it more manageable, regardless of how you do it. I guess.
It's like stress relief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And music does that for me, but there are times when you can't, maybe I don't have my guitar around or whatever. It's just good to have multiple outlets. So anyhow, moving on to the last question, and it kind of ties into the what is not important, but what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and do you think you would take your advice?
My daughter is 16 and she started that college search, and so I've already started with advice for her, and then thinking about when she's around that age, like 18, and then I started to think about all the mistakes I made at that age, like really. And some of it was just no one was really there to tell me otherwise. At the same time, some people did tell me otherwise, and I still did what I wanted to do. So I like that you said, do you think you'd still take it? Because I don't know. I don't know if I would take the advice. But I wish I hadn't really had anybody to talk me through the financial aspects of college. I was first generation pretty much. My parents had gone to community college for half a year, and then I came along. So other than them, I had an uncle who had gone to college, but not many people with any. And even then, their generation, college was practically free. Like my uncle had gone to SUNY ESF, and he could work a summer job and pay his tuition. It's just like, wow, that's so not the case anymore. But I wish I'd explored my options a little more and thought about the career path I was going to go into and the amount of loans I was taking out. And I switched majors, and that meant taking more courses. So I think there's more conversation now around making college more affordable, though, for students. Like a lot of students they do AP or do college credits in high school already. So some of them even graduate in 3 years instead of 4. But I would have given myself a lot of financial advice, and hopefully maybe just hearing it and seeing it in writing and fully understanding it before I signed onto all those student loans. And then I worked, but I would spend my money on stupid things sometimes. So I kind of, I wish I had been more financially responsible. And at 18, you're still a kid, but you're able to take out massive loans. So that's the advice, because then it makes life a little more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something I wasn't thinking about at that age either. But I don't know. I think money has become more important to me as a PhD student because in the Bay Area I have very little money, and so I do still make those stupid purchases every now and then, and maybe that's just youth, but.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. For me, it was like a pair of jeans was the stupid purchase, but it's not that.
Yeah. Some new boots or something. Yeah.
Right. It brought me joy. I wore them. They didn't just sit in my room. But Yeah, the Bay Area is definitely. We toyed with moving out there, but we would have had a much smaller space to live in. But like you said, it is kind of nice to have more moderate temperatures year round. And I think you spend less money on clothes because you don't need winter gear.
Yeah.
Unless you're into skiing or whatever. But yeah.
I am interested in what the weather will be like 25 years in the Bay Area. Because I mean, we can predict a lot of the things that climate change will do, but not necessarily, we're not great at knowing the weather in general. So,
right. That's one area of science that is still sometimes unpredictable.
mm.
I experienced my first dust devils. we were in Hershey, Pennsylvania at my son's baseball tournament, and it was just a hot day. And all of a sudden this big dust devil formed on the baseball field and blew up like some people's canopies and some signs. And then probably 15 minutes later, another one came through, and I had never seen one in my life, but of course that wasn't in the forecast anymore.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's not even, they didn't say, prepare for high winds. It's just suddenly, it's just a normal hot day. But I know there's an explanation for it with the heat, but kind of funny. Yeah, it is crazy to think about that. That's why, as much as I really dislike the cold in the winters here, I am curious to see if they'll continue to get milder. If a white Christmas will be a thing of the past. And also we've had some pretty crazy, like a lot of tornadoes this summer. People used to say they like to live in upstate New York because we don't have natural disasters, but a tornado hit my uncle's house this summer. Fortunately, they'd just put on a metal roof. So these 100-year-old trees, pine trees that landed on the house were left minimal damage. But yeah, I know. California too. Then you think about the ocean levels and those factors.
Yeah, and the earthquakes and fire. I think the fires are what people have been most alarmed by, but I do think those will only get worse.
The wildfires that happen. Yeah, right. Like my friend, last summer here in New York, we had smoke warning 2 different weeks from the Canadian wildfires. Mm-hmm. That was pretty awful. I mean, like eyes burning, windows closed. And then my friends in California said, oh yeah, that's the norm for us. We're used to that. It's like, that's awful. So you think global warming will cause more seismic activity too?
Oh, no, I feel like that's like the one natural disaster that doesn't necessarily get exacerbated. But we are seeing more earthquakes in the country, but usually it's due to like fracking and stuff like that.
Okay. So that is some environmental impact there.
Yeah. Yeah, fracking. Yeah. I have thoughts, but I won't turn this into a rant. Yeah.
I know sometimes I forget that's still happening, and then you drive through an area and go, oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyhow, wrapping up, is there anything else you'd like to plug or maybe say?
Well, no, just thank you for having me on here. And I'm glad we've been able to maintain this friendship with you. Mm-hmm. I was Griffin's cross country coach when he was in high school.
Yeah.
So your
Back
junior,
in the day. Yeah,
junior and senior year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was lots of fun. Griffin was a good leader. Or sorry, am I supposed to say Greasy? Young Greasy?
No, you're not the first person to expose my real name on the podcast.
Oops. Yeah. Just that it's always nice to talk and catch up and hear different perspectives. And I hope you have a good year. Good start to your school year. Are you teaching too?
No, not this semester. I think I want to end up doing probably still at a university, but more teaching than research. But I don't get fulfilled in the same way through research as I do teaching, you know?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's fun to hear other people's ideas, and the excitement's contagious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could lead students in research too, and then in some ways you're doing a lot of research.
Yeah, extraneously.
True.
Well, it's been great having you on the GRODCAST, everyone. This was Ericuh, and yeah, we're out. All right.
Thanks. Bye.
So,
All right.